Hi readers, Chris here. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. I just recently finished reading the first series here. It's 5 books. I did originally review, I think it was books 1 and 2 individually, and then I kind of ran out of time to review the rest of them. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a wrap-up of the entire series. While this video is mostly going to be non-spoiler, I will have a bit of a spoiler section at the end, but I will warn you before I get into that. First, really quick, in case you're not familiar for some reason, Percy Jackson and the Olympians is a middle grade fantasy series of 5 books. The series follows the adventure of a young boy. His name is Percy Jackson, and he is what is known as a demigod. That means that one of his parents was a regular human, and one of his parents was a god. Yes, that's right, a Greek god. These books are all about Greek mythology. So if you are familiar at all with any of the Greek gods, Zeus, Hades, Ares, Athena, they're all in here. They're all in this series. In our first book, the first book is really, it's a setup type of book, because this is the book where we really first get to meet all of the characters and the major players in this world. So obviously we have Percy. He's kind of our main character, and when he kind of figures out very early on in the book that he's a demigod, they have this camp for other demigods, children of gods, and it's called Camp Half-Blood. And at this camp, he meets 2 friends, Grover and Annabeth, and they basically become his best friends and his companions throughout his adventures. You could very much compare this series to like a Harry Potter, where Harry had Ron and Hermione, and Percy has Grover and Annabeth. But unlike Harry Potter, the relationships and the world building that goes on is completely different. So again, in our first book, we meet everyone, we kind of set the stage, and there is an incident that happens very early on in the book where something happens to Percy's mother, and he basically goes on this quest to try and save her. Now, part of the setup of this world is that these Greek gods live in Mount Olympus, but the Mount Olympus in this world is actually in Manhattan. Yes, that's right, New York City, the top of the Empire State Building. Because in this world, the gods exist like they exist in our world. It's just that most people can't see them. And I really love, one of the things I really like about this series is that the way that it explains various things is really interesting. The way that it explains how normal people like you and I wouldn't be able to see the gods, but other people would, I think is really cool. So if you know anything about Greek mythology at all, there's kind of like 2 different types of gods. You have Zeus and his gods that live on Olympus, and then you kind of have this other group of gods that are known as the Titans. And of course, the Titans and the Olympians have been fighting for millennia, forever. And while Zeus is the leader of the Olympians, Kronos is the leader of the Titans. And Kronos has kind of been, we'll say trapped for a very long time, but he's kind of starting to awaken. In the first book, you really just start to hear about him, don't really see him, they don't really interact with him, but obviously that is setting up for stuff later in the series. Another thing that I really love about the series is how funny it is. It is super funny. I'll get into that more when I talk about book 2, but this series really does have a little bit of everything. There's action, there's adventure, there's a bit of romance, not too much because it's a middle grade story, but there is some there. And it's got a ton of humor. So, once Percy completes his quest in book 1, things take a turn in book 2. Book 2, Sea of Monsters, is very similar to Book 1, where there is another quest. There's a lot of quests in this series, and the quest in the first book was like a road trip, basically, with Percy and his friends kind of taken to the road. But in this one, the sequel, the quest is basically a sea voyage. Now, part of me felt like Book 2 was not quite as exciting as Book 1 because it didn't feel as new. It felt like, okay, we're going on a quest again. It's just a little bit different. But what I do like about Book 2, not only are there some great new characters that are introduced here, but again, with the humor, there's some absolutely hilarious scenes in this book that I think are some of the funniest in the whole series. For example, without any sort of context at all, there is a scene involving guinea pigs that is probably one of the funniest things I've ever read. And I don't mean laugh out loud funny. It's more of that silly funny, the silly funny that just puts a smile on your face and makes you feel all, warm and gooey inside. Back to our quest. So the quest in Book 1 was really around trying to save Percy's mother. The quest in this book is around trying to save Camp Half-Blood. Because of what happened in the first book, the camp is now kind of at risk from being attacked. The Titans are starting to wake up, and in order to save the camp, of course, they have to go find a magical object. That's really all I'm going to say about this one without giving anything away. So, like I said, the new characters in here are great. The humor is great. It's not quite as exciting as Book 1, but it's still pretty fun. Now I'm on to the books that I really haven't talked about at all yet, starting with Book 3 of the series, which is called The Titan's Curse. Dun dun dun! If you can't tell, in this one, we get way more information about the Titans and what is going on and how Kronos is waking up. The setup of this book is, there is a quest in this book, but it's a little bit different than Book 1 and 2. The setup of this book is that after the events of the second book, Grover, so one of Percy's best friends, goes missing. And of course, Grover being the best friend and very important to the series, they have to go after him and they have to find him. So again, there's a lot of traveling in this book, there's a lot of adventuring in this book, and there's the setup of even more characters. Even more characters in this book, new characters in this book, and some of the characters that they introduce end up being some of my favorite in the entire series. So, from the first book, there was a character at Percy's camp named Luke. And when Percy first comes to the camp, Luke is kind of like let's call him he's like the popular kid. He's the kid that everyone loves. He's super handsome, and he's strong, and he's smart, and everyone loves him. But throughout the series, and up until this book, he's basically been corrupted, and he's joined Kronos' side. We don't really know in the beginning if it's by choice or if it's because, Kronos has gotten into his mind. We find out a lot more about that in this book. There's a lot of character development in this book. So I wouldn't say this one is my favorite in the series. Honestly, it's in the middle. I feel like this one is kind of forgettable because it doesn't really have the strong moments that some of the other books does. It doesn't have a lot of the humor that the other books does. But there are some characters introduced here that I absolutely, absolutely love. So there's a young boy named Nico and his sister. They're really great. I think this book is the one where they also introduce the Hunters of Artemis, which is basically this group of young female warriors that are super, super cool. So there's a lot good about this book. I didn't find it quite as exciting as some of the other ones. So the first one, absolutely loved. Second one, okay, super, super funny. This one, it's still good. It's still good. I don't want to say that it's not good. It's still good. It's just not quite as good as some of the other ones. That brings me to Book 4, the Battle of the Labyrinth. So again, this book sends our heroes off on another quest. Not a road trip, not a sea voyage, but a actual, legit journey through an actual labyrinth. The reason that they go into this labyrinth is because they know that Luke and his team of Titans and people that are on Kronos' side have allegedly found a secret entrance into their camp, and they need to go into the labyrinth to find him so that they can stop him. This fourth book, again, is very much like book 1 and book 2, where it kind of jumps right in. They go into this quest, and as they go throughout the labyrinth, various things happen along the way. The thing I really, really like about this one is it really starts to answer some of the big questions in the series. And a lot of the questions have to do with, kind of the history of the gods, and specifically like the history of Kronos and the history of Luke. And like, how did Luke end up on the wrong side? How did he end up on the evil side when there's so many people in his life that care about him? Like, they start to hint at it here, and they start to build the building blocks for what's going to happen in the final book 5. So there's a lot of setup in this book, but I still think it has a really good beginning, middle, and end. So I'd say I like book 4 better than book 3. I'd say it's probably about equal as book 2. Again, this book has some incredibly funny scenes in it. Some of the humor is a little juvenile, I have to say that. But it still made me chuckle, and it made me smile. So I would say book 4 I liked just as much as book 2, maybe not quite as much as book 1, definitely more than book 3. If you're keeping track, it's 1, 2, and 4, and then 3 at the bottom so far. And finally, that brings me to book 5, the last book in this series, which is The Last Olympian. This is the book where everything kind of comes to a head. This is the finale. Everything that's happened in the previous books, it's all leading up to this one. And I love this book. I think it's a great finale to the series. Part of the reason I love it is that we finally see Percy get to take on Kronos and his Titans, and they literally do it in the streets of New York, which is so fun to me. I'm a New Yorker, so I get a big kick out of fantasy and fantastical stories that take place in New York, so I am a little biased. I really, really like that. Again, just like book 4 starts to kind of lay the groundwork to answer some of the big questions in the series, everything finally gets answered here. There's no stone unturned, no question left unanswered. Everything clicks into place, everything makes sense. Everything that's been setting up since book 1, Easter eggs, all sorts of stuff, it all comes together here in a great way. And I think it's really hard to do like a final battle type thing that isn't too corny. And I love the way that this series wraps up. From the very first book, Percy was given a prophecy by an oracle at the camp. And just like any book that's really well written, the prophecy comes true, but not in the way that you think that it would. That's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to give away spoilers. I might talk about this more in the spoiler section, but I love when authors can take a prophecy, make it true, but make it true in a totally different way than you expected. So again, this book is great. It is a great ending to the series. It's got action, romance, and actually I think this book probably has the most romance out of all the books, but it's very minor. It is very minor because it's a middle grade fantasy. So if I had to rank this one in the series, I would say book number 1 and book number 5 are my 2 favorite, the ends. 2 and 4 are my next favorites, and then 3 at the bottom. So, yeah. So that is my review wrap-up of the Percy Jackson series. I think this series is absolutely great. Totally understand why it's so popular and why so many people love it. And I can't wait to see what they do with the TV show. If there's any interest, maybe I will review that, do a little comparison. We'll see. Those are all my non-spoiler thoughts. I just want to do a couple little spoilers here at the end because I love to talk about books and I want to talk about this a little bit. So if you don't want to know anything, any spoilers, click away now. Come back later someday when you've actually read the series. 3, 2, 1. If you're still here, I want to talk about that prophecy. I absolutely love that the way they set it up in book 1 is that Percy gets this prophecy, and this prophecy is about him. And yes, part of the prophecy you could say is about him, but the fact that the prophecy is really about Luke, who's pretty much been the villain of the story, like he's becomes the villain in book 1, remains the villain throughout the series, and the fact that he is kind of all of a sudden at the end the hero, the one that the prophecy about, I think is really cool. I thought that was a really good twist, and I really like the way that they did it. I love the way that, just Luke's whole backstory with his mother trying to become an oracle, and it goes wrong, and she goes crazy. He thinks, this whole time, Percy thinks that his father, Hermes, never loved him, but that's not true at all. Like, there's just so many great little details that I love how they all interconnect. I think that's really cool. Really cool world building, really great characters. The other character I just wanted to talk about quick, one of my favorites in the series is actually Nico. So, Hades' children, Nico and Bianca, I hope that's the right name. I love them. I wasn't like a big fan when they were first introduced, but after Bianca dies and then Nico kind of goes a little nutty, but then he ends up kind of coming back into the fold, I just loved his whole story arc. And I thought that Nico's arc, starting from innocent kid, choosing to be bad, but then kind of choosing to be on the side of the hero, versus Luke, who chooses to be kind of bad and then can't help but be bad, is finally given a chance to come back at the end. Like, I just love their two storylines. I don't know why, but for some reason I just didn't connect with Luke as much. Like, I didn't really care about him, and I don't understand why Annabeth was so obsessed with him. I know that, they gave information and flashbacks to kind of explain that, but I always thought it was a little bit weird. Especially because they were trying so hard to set up this romance between Annabeth and Percy. I thought it was a little weird how obsessed with Luke she was. It made me question, does she really have feelings for Percy, or does she actually have feelings for Luke and they're just friends? Sometimes it was obvious, but sometimes it did make me question, so I don't know if that's good writing or not good writing. I don't know. But anyway, all of that to say, circle around here. I'm rambling. Really, really loved Nico. I thought he was a cool character, and I loved his arc. And of course, our doggy, our underworld doggy who can travel and teleport. Super, super, super cool. I know that previously they did do a Percy Jackson movie, and I did watch it, but it's been so long that I really don't remember it. The only thing I remember is that I remember seeing a lot of reviews and talking to people who had read the books at the time, saying that the movie was garbage. Basically, it was garbage and that it wasn't like the books at all. It was not as good. So I hope that when this new show comes out that they can actually give it the level of attention that it deserves. If they can nail the characters, if they can nail the adventure, the humor, and the relationships and the friendships and all of that, I think they could have a really big hit on their hand, but they really need to nail the relationships. I think the relationships between the characters are what make this series work. Percy's relationship with Grover, the two of them being best friends, Percy's relationship with Tyson, his other half-brother, Percy and Annabeth, obviously. Even Rachel, I loved Rachel. I thought she was a great character too. Because at first, she's just like a regular human, and then she kind of has a weird power, and it doesn't make any sense why she has this power, because she's not a demigod. There's just so much good things in this series, so many great characters. I hope that they can do it justice. Those are really the only things I wanted to blab about really quick. Meepers was knocking at the door. She wants to blab about it too. She's a big fan of Annabeth. Meepers, are you a big fan of Annabeth? I know you are. Anyway, if you made it this far in the video, please give it a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't like it, that's okay too. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish content and maybe more Meepers coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading. Who's a good girl? I love you. Oh, I love you too. Thank you.